You are listening to Stump the Pastor, the show where you, the listener, send us your Bible-related questions and we attempt to answer them for you. I'm your host, Pastor Ellis Wedel, and today in the studio I have with me my friends Adam Hrankowski.
Shalom.
And Matt Wedel.
Hello.
So we are glad to be back here with you guys. It's getting close to the time of year when we celebrate all things cold and wintry, and I like that. So I'm in a good mood tonight. So we're going to be talking about a topic that I think is a good one, because I don't think that there's a lot of people out there, and you might correct me if I'm wrong,
Okay.
If you know, but I don't think there's a lot of people who are asking the question that this is. And the reason I don't think they're asking is because I think they're just taking for granted that, this is the way it works. And a lot of people, like I went to a lot of sites to deal with the question, and comments, on all these sites, they always have a place for comments. And the comments afterwards, like, I didn't even know this was an issue. Like, why is this even an issue? Why would we even care about whether this is, this seems like a no-brainer. But I'm not sure that it is such a no-brainer.
It stops being a no-brainer when it's in your face.
Yeah, I guess so.
So what is the question?
The question is, should Christians be organ donors? So
As often as possible.
Give away as many organs as you can give away, is what we're saying. So the question itself, I mean, a lot of people would just be saying, well, of course we should do that. I mean, that's if we can do it, if we can help somebody, then why wouldn't we do that? But I think that there are some real good questions to be raised, and I'm not saying one way or the other, good or bad at this point. I'm just saying there are some real questions that should be probably looked at, and verses that should be thought through before we just jump on the wagon and do that. So what we want to do is, I want to start it out. I'm going to turn it over to Adam for a minute here, and he's going to go through some I guess where some Christian denominations sit with regard to organ donation.
Sure. What they say. And before I do that, I want to say organ donation is way more common than we think. Because you want to know what the most common kind of organ donation is?
I don't know.
Blood donation.
Blood donation.
Blood donation. Blood is an organ. And people do it all the time.
Blood is an organ. Is it really?
Blood is an organ.
Oh, well, that's it. I mean, because I didn't even know.
Yeah,
that.
there you go.
So there you stumped the pastor again here already.
Yeah, it's my job. I do the stumping.
Okay. So just so everybody on the air knows, you were an organ donor.
I was an organ donor.
So this is kind of personal for you.
Yes.
So yeah, let's.
I donated a kidney.
Yeah. Way to go.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
So I went to the BC Transplant website. Yeah. Which, by the way, quick plug, that's where you would go to sign up to be an organ donor. Often people think of organ donation as, if I were to die, God forbid.
Right.
Yeah, I'd like to be a donor, and that's where you can go to the BC Transplant website. Okay, and I went there, and it's got the question, because you've got the FAQ, and this is something that people think about. Well, is it okay? Is it part of my, would there be a religious objection?
Right.
And they have a link to another website. It's www.organtransplants.org/understanding/religion. Okay. And they quote liberally from a book, which I got to scroll way down here. What's the book they quote from? It's called Organ and Tissue Donation, a Reference Guide for Clergy, 4th edition, 2000, published by Cooper M.L. Taylor G.J. Well, they're the editors, and they're in Richmond, Virginia. Okay, so there's your reference. You always got to put the footnotes here.
There you go.
I'm a footnote guy. So I mean they've got a whole bunch of stuff, but they start out with a quote from the Talmud. Mm-hmm. Okay, and the Talmud if you're an educated Christian, you've read the church fathers. Okay, these are the writings of people who are authoritative Christians throughout
right.
you're
talking about guys like Luther and Calvin and Augustine and all these kind of guys.
That's right. Yeah, people like them.
Yes.
Okay, so this is kind of the equivalent, but the Jewish equivalent. Right. The Talmud, it's authoritative writings on Judaism, and what the Talmud says What follows is an overview of... No, that's not what it says. Sorry. If you save one life, it is as though you saved the world.
Okay.
Okay. If you save one life, it's as though you saved the world. And then what I've done is I selected various Christian commentary here. They've got Amish, Assembly of God. Here's what the Assembly of God says. The church has no official policy regarding organ and tissue donation. The decision to donate is left up to the individual. Donation is highly supported by the denomination. Okay, so they don't say go do it, but we'll applaud you. Here's what Catholicism says.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it means Roman Catholicism when it says this. Catholics view organ and tissue donation as an act of charity and love. Transplants are morally and ethically acceptable to the Vatican. And then there's plenty more that it says about that here. Greek Orthodox. According to Reverend Dr. Milton, Efthymiou. Okay, I think that's Greek. Director of the Department of the Church and Society for the Greek Orthodox Church of North and South America, quote, the Greek Orthodox Church is not opposed to organ donation as long as the organs and tissues in question are used to better human life, i.e. for transplantation or for research that will lead to improvements in the treatment and prevention of disease. You notice how some of these are sort of backhanded. It's just like, we don't disagree.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But then the other one comes and says, but it's not a bad idea. Okay. Now, I'm going to bring up the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to bring up the Jehovah's Witnesses, even though, they're considered like they're a fringe group. They're outside of what we would call mainstream Christianity, Orthodox Christianity. They refer to themselves as Christians, but they're quite
different. Yes.
They're quite different. They would regard themselves as the only Christians.
Right.
Okay, so that's where they are. And I was surprised by what this said. According to the Watchtower Society, Jehovah's Witnesses believe donation is a matter of individual decision. Jehovah's Witnesses are often assumed to be opposed to donation because of their belief against blood transfusion.
Right.
Okay, I thought this was the case myself, so I learned something here. However, this merely means that all blood must be removed from the organs and tissue before being transplanted. So you have to casher the kidney before you. Let's see, is there anything here that really jumps out at me? Society of Friends, the Quakers. Organ and tissue donation is believed to be an individual decision. The Society of Friends does not have an official position on donation. And then I'll mention something here from Judaism because of its historical connection with Christianity.
Yep.
All four branches of Judaism, Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, and Reconstructionist, support and encourage donation. So it's not just they're not just saying it's okay if you want to. They're saying we support and encourage it. And
in the end, there was none of the ones that were on there that said no. You can't do it.
I don't think anybody said no.
Right.
I don't think anybody said no. But I got to. Did you ever watch All in the Family?
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
All in the Family.
Absolutely.
You know what? Yes. Now I want to ask, what were you doing watching? You're not much older than I am. What were you doing watching All in the Family?
My dad loved All in the Family, so I ended up watching it too.
Do you remember the episode when Archie Bunker he signed up? He didn't know what he was signing up for, but he's in the boss's office and he wants to impress the boss, and they're taking donations. So he says, "Oh, sign me up for that." And he finds out that he's signing up to be an organ donor, right? And so he goes and he goes home and he's just he has so much angst about this, and he has this dream, and he tells his wife. Okay, and I'm not just telling this for fun because this is something I think that people think about. Okay.
Edith.
Yeah, he tells Edith. He tells Edith that he had this terrible dream and that he died. And he goes, and I'm going up to heaven, and they're cutting off my arms and my legs, and when I get up there, the Lord, he doesn't recognize me because he's mad because God is mad at him because he didn't come back to heaven with all the parts he sent him down to earth with. And this is, I think the reason why All in the Family was such a popular show, because it speaks to people's hearts. It speaks to people.
some of the things that we weren't willing to talk
some
about.
of the people,
or even
things
bring
that
up.
we weren't willing to talk about. So this is why I think it's good to answer these questions, because people have these feelings about it. I'm cutting my body up.
Now
Is it right?
Let's start out, since you brought up this blood thing. Now, and I didn't. You know what? I saw there's lots of stuff in the Bible with regard to blood issue
Yep,
stuff, right? But I didn't put any of it in because I didn't look. I thought, well, that's not even. We're talking about organ. Donations here. We're not talking about blood donations. So I didn't even bother to put any of that in here. But there are lots of verses in the Bible where God says part of the rules that he gave to the Jews were stay away from things. Don't ever eat blood. Don't drink blood, right? Even in the New Testament, right?
In Acts 15,
That's
that's
right.
reiterated,
when the Gentiles come in, right? And then it's like, okay, we stay away from the eating of blood. And in certain verses, God says, stay away from it because that's where the life is in the blood.
That's right. Where the soul is in the blood.
Right.
Yeah. So what does that mean?
And so in saying that, the question obviously comes around, what exactly are we doing when we give blood? Are we giving, because from a spiritual sense, are we just giving this liquid that's red and can keep you alive? Or is there something about that blood, inherently about that blood, that would make it so that this is an issue?
I don't know, Ellis. This isn't in our notes.
I know, exactly. And I'm just thinking about it now, but I think that obviously there's a lot of people who have thought about it, and it's not so much an issue for them.
Sure.
But the question, I wonder what the issue is, like how they came to that conclusion.
Who you talking about? You're talking about
those who are okay with blood transfusion.
Oh, no, those who are okay with blood transfusion.
When there's verses like that,
right?
Like how do we know exactly what that means?
Well, this is the Jehovah's Witnesses. The Bible talks about consuming blood. They say don't eat blood. Okay, and then in Acts chapter 15, it reiterates that. So they see blood transfusion. I don't see it this way, but they see blood transfusion and participating in blood transfusion as violating that eating, that consuming the blood. But it's interesting to note that they're unique in that position. I'm sure other people probably agree with them, but they're the ones who are famous for that. And then, people will even argue, yeah, but you're not eating the blood. But they'll say, okay, but how come when you, if you sometimes you'll be fed intravenously, right, right? They'll argue that, but I would say yes, but you're not digesting. You're not digesting the blood.
And plus, I guess I would add to that as well that with regard to a blood transfusion, they didn't really have blood transfusions at the time that the Bible was written. Or am I mistaken there?
I'm pretty sure they didn't.
So that being the case,
it would be anachronistic to bring it up.
Well, yeah. How could they bring up something that didn't even exist at the time?
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And so would these verses then apply to that?
Yeah. Okay, but they would argue. Okay, I wouldn't argue, but since we're going there, they would argue that you always have to make a generalization because you know what? They didn't have egg beaters.
Well, that's true.
They didn't have egg beaters in the bathroom either.
Yeah.
I'm going to mention the bathroom because I saw this movie one time where somebody murdered somebody by throwing an egg beater that had been plugged into the bathtub. Right, and he electrocuted him, right? Okay, so we generalize thou shalt not murder into you shouldn't throw an egg beater into the bathtub when it's plugged in and kill somebody, right? So what I'm saying is they're making a generalization. I don't agree with the generalization, and what I find interesting is you've got Jewish halakha, Jewish practice. Okay, I have not heard of any Jewish practice that opposes blood transfusion, and these are people who still regard the commandments in the Torah against consuming blood. They won't eat blood, right? Don't invite a Jewish person over for blood pudding, right? But they will still accept a blood transfusion, as far as I know, based on that idea that preserving life is above, takes precedence.
Yeah.
In fact, I heard of a case of a fellow who was a Jewish fellow, Orthodox Jew, who was raising rabbits. And why was he raising rabbits? In case hard times came by and he would have to eat them. He wouldn't eat rabbits today because they're not kosher. They're biblically unclean. They're forbidden.
Yeah.
Right? But he would eat rabbits the same way you hear the story of the plane that crashed in the Andes,
And they had to eat each other.
and they ate people.
Yeah.
They wouldn't do it today, right? And so the point being, my point being is I think blood transfusions and organ donations are appropriate, notwithstanding some of these things we're going to bring up,
Yeah.
because ultimately, as one of these commentators points out, it's being used to save a life.
Okay. And I'm gonna add, through this thing. We're actually gonna do 2 shows on this. This is the first one, but through this discussion, I'm gonna sometimes be playing the devil's advocate here.
Okay.
And so I'm going to be at times arguing against the idea that we should be doing.
So
that.
you'll be bad cop, and then
You'll be good cop, and I'll be bad cop. Yeah. So what I found out is that there are 5 general, 5 different reasons why people have historically been against organ donation.
Okay.
And the first one has to do with resurrection bodies, and I'm going to let you know what that is, but then I'm going to not talk much about it until after I give all 5 of them.
Okay.
So resurrection bodies is this idea that many Christians may fail to donate organs because of the idea that the total body is necessary at the resurrection. Okay.
Okay.
So if you don't have, God is going to at one point resurrect us, and we need to all our parts need to be there.
Okay.
In order for things to work out well. The next one is this idea called the principle of totality. And what it said, this is a direct quote from the source that I got this from, and it says, "This principle advocates maintaining the wholeness of the body, but is extended to allow for removal of a part of the body if it's done in the interest of or for the benefit of the whole person." So they would agree with the resurrection body kind of thing, that we need to stay in one piece, but if you can,
it's okay to get a tooth pulled.
Yeah, it's okay to get a tooth pulled, or to have a part of your arm amputated if that's going to keep you alive.
Yep.
That kind of thing. The next one is called the issue of mutilation.
Before you go on,
okay.
If I could point out this principle of totality, to use a analogy, because Paul in the New Testament, he uses this analogy about the body of Christ. Okay, so we're a body. You're part of the body. I'm part of the body. Matt over there, he's part of the body.
Yeah.
Right. And then he talks about excommunication in 1 Corinthians. There was somebody who had been sinning sexually, and I think that he was basically saying this is going to damage the body,
right.
And so he was saying we need to cut that person off,
right.
Remove him. Whereas I think you wouldn't take excommunication lightly, but for this case, for the benefit of the body, this person was removed, and in fact, it was so that he could even repent. I think so. It was for the benefit of the body. The body was mutilated. I'm doing the little air quotes.
Yeah.
In that case,
which though is the part that playing the devil's advocate.
Okay.
I'll now bring that up, and you brought it up. Is that the whole point of the removal was to again assimilate them back to the body again?
It was to assimilate them back,
which is different than
gotcha.
organ donation, because
sure.
You don't bring that organ back into your body again once you've done it, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's.
So yes, it was okay to remove it, but the whole purpose of the removal was to get it back again, healthy. It's kind of like taking something out, fixing it, and then put it back in again.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
In that sense.
So what if science develops far enough that we can get some sort of gene makeover that allows us to regrow parts of our body?
Yeah, what about that?
Well, then I guess in that case we wouldn't even need to donate bodies.
Well, here's one thing they are
organs.
doing scientifically, is that they are using stem cell research to do things like grow organs,
mm-hmm.
and they're talking about growing even what we would consider to be clone type things.
Mm-hmm.
There was a movie about this at one time. It was called The Island, I think it was called. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but what they did is they had people in the future go to this place, and they would pay an exorbitant amount of money, these all rich people, to have a clone made of themselves, so that if anything happened to them, then their clone, they would just take parts out of their clone to be put into them.
Now, I saw a documentary years and years and years ago talking about the potential of doing that sort of thing, and the question that they raised about the ethics of cloning human beings
Yeah.
so that for their body parts is, so what would we do with the waste, the leftover bits? And they asked, what would we call it? And I really liked that question. It's right. This was decades ago I saw this. That what would we call it? Because we always have to choose our terminology in order to sell an idea.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And I mean, I know the question that was asked in when I was looking at this information with regard to, cloning parts was from a biblical perspective, we don't know when the soul enters a body.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so we have no idea, because we don't know that, we don't know if a soul enters a body while we're, if we were to clone a part or a body even, when the soul, and so when the soul goes into it, then we would, as Christians, say, now it is what?
It's a person,
living human being, right? So now we're killing somebody in order to do something else. And
which is why Christians have been typically opposed to abortion, because
we believe that.
because we treat it as if it's a human being right from the
conception,
right from conception.
Yeah.
Although the Christian church hasn't always taught that, but we're getting way beyond.
We are getting way beyond
it, but it's so much fun.
It is good. Well, it's all relevant though. I mean, this is a big issue.
Yeah.
So anyway, the next one I was going to bring up was this issue of mutilation.
Mutilation.
And this is what it says. It says, finally, it is important to address the issue of mutilation as it relates to the principle of totality. Albert Johnson reports that the issue of mutilation dates back to the ancient question of whether or not we have the right or authority to mutilate our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And this is that idea that from a Christian perspective, our bodies don't belong to us.
Right.
They belong to God. And so do we have the right, because we have verses that are like, our bodies are the temple.
Sure.
And take care of the temple, all those kinds of things. Is it right then for us to do things that could harm the body in order to help somebody else?
And in the Old Testament, you've got prohibitions against damaging your body, right? I mean, right down to tattoos and ear piercing and cutting yourself
for the dead or whatever.
For the dead.
Right.
It was for the but it even gets into, so don't cut your hair this way.
Right.
So this is where I think this stems from.
Yeah, and I think that no matter what side of the issue you fall down or fall into, you need to wrestle with these issues and come to some kind of.
Yeah.
And this is my point. I mean, I hope if we go through this thing now in the next 2 sessions.
Okay.
And the one thing I would hope that everybody out there who might be listening would get out of this is not necessarily the answer to this question, but that they need to be searching these questions out and finding out for themselves where they stand on these issues.
Because you know what? You don't want to be making this decision. You don't want to be thinking about this stuff if you've got a loved one who's passed on and then they come to you and say, you know what, he's not signed up to be an organ donor, but you're the decision maker. Yeah. Make a decision. So think about this. You want to think about this stuff now.
Right.
Yeah.
And along with that, I've asked probably 2 or 3 people this last week about what their view is on this issue.
Okay.
And their view was, well, of course we'll donate. And I start bringing up some questions with regard to it, and they're like, I don't know, never thought of that. Huh. Well, you know what? You really should think of that before you just decide, well, I'm going to do it, right? And not because I don't think they should do it, but because they need to know and be okay in their own mind with what the Bible's saying and what they.
You don't want to think about this stuff afterwards,
right? And
then go, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Should I have done that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The next thing. Did you have something you wanted to say? Okay. So the next thing that's brought up is this issue called life prolonged, and prolongation of life is another moral issue that may be associated with organ donation or transplantation. The obvious goal of this medical advancement is prolonging life that has been potentially shortened by failure of some part of the body. And so now there's a few questions that come up with regard to this, and one of them is, and this is one that was brought up when I was younger, I remember this being talked about, if God has a date or a time picked out for us to come or go, then are we now arbitrarily extending the time that God would have us to be doing that?
Are we arbitrarily extending the time by eating organic? Right.
Well,
so
these
you
are
know
those
what?
questions,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Okay. My point being is, I don't agree with that sort of thinking.
My theology doesn't fall in line with that
Well,
either. I know some people
you're a little
would.
too Calvinistic for that.
I
Yeah.
do.
Okay. What I mean by that is, just to translate, I don't think you can really have God go, oh, you totally messed up my plans. Now what am I going to do?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is a question some people would be asking, I think. The last one that is brought up.
Just a quick thing to throw in with that last view there.
Yeah.
If God has, so the parts of the body would be failing because after Adam and Eve sinned, sin entered the world.
Right.
So, I mean, an argument could be made that we're just trying to fix the problem we made from the beginning by trying to make someone's life last as long as it can. But on the same token, you're now trying to play God. And do you have the right to play that role?
Right. So in other words, in a general sense, it doesn't matter what our issue is in life. The answer to that issue is, anybody know?
You stumped the
It's God. It's
God, yeah.
The answer, right? From a Christian's perspective.
Okay, yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're, if you're having money issues. The answer is God. It's not the answer isn't money. If you're having a relationship issue, the answer isn't a relationship issue. The answer is you got an issue you need to deal with God. It doesn't matter what your issue is. It all comes back to God is the answer to your problem.
Okay.
Okay. And so if that is the case, if you're dying, if something is you is dying, then the answer to that problem is God. The answer is not us, right? So when we look to in a financial issue, if I look to I'm going to get this problem solved by going to the bank and getting a loan, which I mean a lot of us do, but we hope that in doing that as Christians that we're doing what God would have us to do. That God's told us that this is the way we want you to do this. But God is the first thing. So we have to hear from him that is the thing to do before we do it. He's the first thing that we go to. Are we trying to, if we don't go to God first and we just go to the bank, then we're trying to use the bank to solve the problem that God's supposed to be solving in our life. We're using that as a way to be able to try to fix what only God can fix. And so is that then an issue when it comes to organ donation or trying to fix our bodies? Are we, in doing that, trying to use something outside of what we should be using to fix the problem?
So then, just to reiterate what you said there, it's okay to go to the bank and get a loan as long as you go to God first and he tells you to do it.
Right.
More next week.
Yes.
More next week.
The last one that we have here with regard to this, and I'm going to go through it quick. It's called the natural order. And what it says is that a final consideration relates to the correlation between organ donation and transplantation and the possibility of interfering with the natural order. Some people feel that organ transplantation is contrary to natural law, supporting the concept on the basis of the inevitable rejection of one's body to the newly transplanted organ or tissue. So they would say here, this isn't something that is natural or good. Somebody who does this even has to stay on pills, anti-rejection pills, all their life to be able to keep this working. And so because it's unnatural, you shouldn't do it. I think that's how far as we can go today, but we want to thank you for joining with us today, and we ask that you would join with us again next Sunday at 8:30. If you have any questions for Stump the Pastor, please send it to my email, which is pastorwedel, Wedel, @outlook.com. And if your question is chosen to go on the air, you'll receive a gift, compliments of Heartland Baptist Church and CFIS FM. Until next time, may God richly bless you, and so long.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
You are listening to Stump the Pastor, the show where you, the listener, send us your Bible-related questions, and we attempt to answer them for you. I'm your host, Pastor Ellis Wedel, and today in the studio I have with me my friends, Adam Hrankowski.
Saluton, kiel vi fartis.
Oh,
That's
man.
Esperanto.
My goodness, we're getting fancy here.
My daughter put me up to that. It means, how are you?
Good for him. Good for her.
All I got out of that was fartus.
Yeah, I know.
There's going to be a lot of people who probably get that out of it.
It's a constructed language, and they invented a word like that. I mean, that could have been avoided. Continue.
Either way, Matt Wedel is the other one.
Hey, that's me.
So we are continuing on a topic that we started last week, and the issue or the question is this: should Christians be organ donors? And last week we just we talked a little bit about some of this stuff, and then we brought up 5 reasons historically why some people have thought that this is an issue. One issue was what's called resurrection bodies.
Yep.
One is called the principle of totality. One's called the issue of mutilation. Then there's life prolonged and the natural order. All 5 of those. But here's what we're going to do to start off today. We're going to first of all talk about reasons why the Bible might say that we should help people
Okay.
that are struggling in this way. So what are some verses that we could look at that would tell us that that's the case?
For the listeners out there, I just wanted to remind them that for a lot of what we're going through here, Ellis, you're going to be playing devil's advocate. This doesn't necessarily, or what you say doesn't necessarily reflect what you believe on this.
Yeah, here's what I'll say so that everybody knows from the very beginning is that right now my specific view is that organ donation is fine. And I would support that with anybody that decides that they want to do that. In fact, I've thought about the possibility of being an organ donor myself at some point. I do think that there are some issues within the Bible that would have us at least question whether this is the right thing or the wrong thing to do. So
Better to think about it now
right.
and answer these questions now than in the heat of the moment when a decision has to be made.
Right. So I am going to be arguing from the other side at some point in here.
Yeah.
But first of all, let's look at some verses that we would point to say that this is a good thing to do.
Okay.
Romans 13:9 says this: "For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word: you shall love your neighbor as yourself." The next few that are here all talk about this similar issue that we need to love our neighbor, we need to love our enemy, we need to love it. So let me just go through these quick. James 2 verse 8 says, "If you really fulfill the royal law according to Scripture, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Then you're doing well." 1 John 4:11 says, "Beloved, if God so loved us, we ought to love one another." 1 Corinthians 6:19-20. "Or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, that you have from God? You are not your own, you're bought with a price, so glorify God in your body." Actually, that's one that would probably work better for the other side. I don't think that works as good for this one. But it might work. It might work good for this one too, because you're glorifying God in your body by doing something that is sacrificial with your body.
Cutting off a piece of it and
Helping somebody with that,
but
right?
helping somebody.
Yeah. So it could go both ways.
It could go both ways. So somebody could come in there already thinking something, and then this will seem as a support for
Right.
what they're already thinking. Yeah.
Right. So the first few verses, here's what we want to say. There is an overriding principle within the Bible amongst a few of the authors of the Bible, those who got to work through, to say that we need to love our neighbor. And part of what we would consider to be loving our neighbor is helping them when they're in a life or death situation.
If somebody has 2 cloaks, give them one.
Exactly.
Right? You give away one. If you've got two
Kidneys?
two kidneys, give away
Give
one.
one. That's right.
Yeah.
So there you go. So we would say those verses would definitely be verses we could point to help us to say that, yes, this is a good thing.
Okay.
And I'm going to go through another scripture here that I think supports that idea. Matthew 25:35-46. And this is a part of the Bible where Jesus was talking. And he's talking about people who are standing before God on the judgment day.
Okay.
And this is what he says, starting in verse 35. "For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will answer them, Truly I say to you, as you did to one of the least of my brothers, you did it to me. Then he will say to those on his left," now these are the ones who are not going to make it to heaven, according to the story, "Depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me, naked, and you did not clothe me, sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. Then they also will answer, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison, and did not minister to you? Then he will answer them, saying, Truly I say to you, as you did not do to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. So the overall kind of story you get from this is that God expects that we're going to do good to those who are less fortunate than ourselves. And somebody who's got an organ that's failing or a life or death situation obviously is in less circumstance or a worse circumstance than we are.
They need help.
And we can help them.
They need help.
Right? So any other verses that you want to bring up?
Sure, I'll bring up one. I want to mention that I was an organ donor.
Yes.
Okay, I was a living donor. Often we talk about organ donation. We talk about you sign up, you sign up, and then if you die, then you give something away. But you can also be a living donor. And one of the things, something that inspired me for this is a story about something I saw my wife did. Is she had this piano. Okay, and that her grandmother had given her, and we moved, and every time we moved, she'd take it with us, and she hardly played it. So finally, she decided, well, I'm going to sell this piano. She's had it for years. I'm going to sell it. Okay, and she couldn't sell it. Even just people didn't want to buy an old piano.
Yeah.
And then we had some friends who wanted a piano, but they couldn't afford to buy it. So we finally said, let's just give them the piano. And so that inspired me because I figured if my wife can give away a piano, I can give away an organ.
Yeah. Well,
okay. You were. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. You can snip that out, Matt.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. The scripture that I want to bring up. The scripture that I want to bring up is from Matthew chapter 12. Okay. And the context is. Is people are accusing Jesus of violating the Sabbath. Okay, so we've got Jewish people for whom the Sabbath is very important.
Yep.
The Sabbath is very important. In fact, it defines who they are. To violate the Sabbath would be very un-Jewish.
Right.
Okay, and so Jesus has healed somebody on the Sabbath. And they go, you know what? There's 6 days that you can go around healing. Why are you healing on the Sabbath? And then and so Jesus says, I'm going to read from Matthew 12, verse 10. A man was there who had a withered hand, and they asked Jesus, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? So they could accuse him, so they're trying to catch him.
Yeah.
Okay. He said to them, I'm reading from the Net Bible, by the way. He said to them, would not any one of you, if he had one sheep that fell into a pit on the Sabbath, take hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable is a person than a sheep? So it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. And then he goes and he heals the person on the Sabbath. So my point being here is that Jesus is saying that there's a pecking order. Yes, of principles.
Right.
Okay, so that if you have two principles that God has given us, one is, there's a commandment, obey this, observe the Sabbath, but then you have another one, do good. You have an opportunity to do good. You'd pull the sheep out of the pit.
Yeah.
Okay. So to me, yes, you've got these principles of and they're from Scripture. Don't mutilate your body.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay? But it's lawful to do good. And so just like, and you got other examples of people so-called, quoting air quotes, violating the Sabbath, but they do it for a higher purpose.
Right. And I like the way that you explained that earlier before we actually started recording with this idea that it's not that there's two principles and we're going to violate one in order to do the other one.
Sure.
But that there's two principles and they're both good things, but we have to decide which is the better thing to do.
Which is the better thing to do.
And so it's not that we're violating the one. We agree that it's a good thing, but we're going to do the better thing.
Yep.
Right. So I think that's a good way to look at it.
Even though Jesus actually uses that term, break the Sabbath, and he's talking about circumcision, that the priest will violate the Sabbath. but I don't think he's culpable. That's his point, is he's not guilty of violating the Sabbath because there's the higher principle that he's done, the circumcision in that case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other verses or things you want to bring up with regard to support?
That's what I had in mind.
Okay. Well, that's basically what I found, the majority of what I found.
Yeah.
So here's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to bring up some issues that that are going to at least ask the question whether there are some reasons why we shouldn't think that this is the best thing to do.
Okay.
Okay. So the first question I have is, or the first thing I would ask is this: is physical life always, ever, the best option? And in order for you to understand what this question means, you have to know what the theology behind it is. And when we say, is it better that I would be in heaven with God, or is it better that I would be on earth here?
Mm-hmm.
Which one would we say is better?
Oh, heaven sounds good.
Heaven, we would say that, wouldn't we say that heaven is better? That we would rather be with God, the Creator? I mean, in the end, all of us are saying we're living this life so that one day we can get to heaven, right? Mm-hmm. That's our whole purpose in trying to get through this life, is so that one day we'll be able to get to that place.
Yet for some reason we prolong it.
Somehow, yeah. So why, if it's always better to be with God, why would we want to prolong the life in order to continue to be living here? And I guess, the only answer I could think of is that, well, maybe not everybody is going to be in heaven. And so then we want to prolong the life in order to allow them, give them the choice to be able to make that decision. But as far as Christians go, why would we want to do that?
So are you saying it's better for me to just go and commit suicide than to keep living how I am now?
Well, no, because I guess, now we're getting into a whole nother rabbit trail here, but just really quickly, for those of you who might be out there thinking about doing that.
Just tuning in and going,
as you just say, we should just all commit suicide. Yeah, no, I'm not saying that at all. I think that there's a difference between God allowing our bodies to naturally do whatever they do or have whatever problems they have, and us intentionally taking our life in order to accomplish a mission.
And to address actually what you were talking about, Matt, is you hear stories about people who kill their children and then give the argument that because their children are babies, now they're going to go to heaven.
Yeah.
Right? And so and they believe that. And people who believe that that's true, that those kids went to heaven because they're before the age of accountability, which is a whole other Stump the Pastor, right? They still go, there's something wrong with this. So there is something wrong, whether we can argue why it is or not. The idea is we're supposed to live these lives that we've been given.
Yeah.
There's
something inherently wrong that we don't know what, we can't necessarily put our finger on.
We can't put our finger on it.
But we know that there's something the matter.
There's something the matter. So now the question now becomes, do we extend a life as far as possible at all cost?
Right.
And I think that's
really the question. Yes.
That's your question.
Yeah.
And that also goes back to the question I asked before. Do we have the right to try and take God's spot in trying to prolong life?
Right, which is part of that question we talked about last week.
But you know what? That's the thing you brought up, because you were saying that because the failing organ is a result of the fall of Adam and Eve.
Right.
That's what you mentioned.
Sin,
Yes. Because it's a result of sin. Okay. So now I could take that argument and go, okay. So what did God say to Adam and Eve? He said to Adam, you're going to now have frustration when you try, you're going to, thorns and thistles will come from the land because the land is now cursed because of you. So does that mean that we're frustrating God when we buy fertilizer?
And make it easier for us.
And make it easier for us.
Right.
And then to the woman, he said, I'm going to increase your pain in childbirth. So does that mean we're frustrating God when we...
Give an epidural?
That's right. Good luck with that argument.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Honey, I think that you should know.
A lot of thought needs to be put into this.
A lot of thought needs to be put into this. Yeah.
Well, let me try. There's a few things that I want to get through here, so we're gonna have to skippity-doo-dah here. So I just go fast.
That's a theological term.
Yeah. So let me go through this and try and set it up so that you understand what the question is here. First of all, we're gonna have to go into some area that you're probably, those listening are gonna say, well, what's that got to do with organ transplants? But you'll get to it you'll understand when we get to the question. First of all, will we have our bodies forever is where I want to start. Because I'm going to look at this first, the first objection to organ transplants, which was our resurrection bodies.
Okay.
And I want to kind of set up the argument for why this is an issue, or why it could be an issue. So, will we have our bodies forever? And I think theologically, from my perspective, yes, we will. We will always have our bodies. Our body and soul will always. Body and soul are meant to be together. Our soul departs from us at death for a short amount of time, but its goal is always to get back to our body again.
Okay. Yeah. That's resurrection.
At the
you're talking
resurrection,
about.
it's part of the
Yeah,
resurrection,
the
right?
resurrection.
So
Jesus. I mean, Jesus had the same body that went to the cross.
Right.
He showed his hands, and they had holes in them.
yes,
Right, because they had been crucified.
Right.
He'd been crucified, and the body was gone, and then now we see Jesus. It's the same body. It's been changed, but it's him.
right.
Yeah.
And that's what I would use for an argument for that anyway.
Yep.
So the question is then, if that's the case, and understand that I know that not everybody may have thought through this, but the next question would be, where are our bodies going to come from if we will have bodies forever? Now, I think there's some people out there there's two views, I think, in Christendom. One is that at the day of the resurrection, God is going to create out of nothing a new body for us. I think some people believe that. Okay. In fact, I know some people believe that because I had at least one family leave our church because I made the comment that our old bodies are what he's going to make our new bodies out of. Okay. And they didn't believe that. They said that was not right. They left the church because of it. So that is my position, that our old bodies are what he creates our new bodies out of. And the reason I believe that, I'm going to go into in a minute here, but I want to go on for a second here. If it is our old bodies that he makes our new bodies out of, will God put all the pieces back together again in our old bodies before he transforms it or glorifies it? This is a question you need to ask. Because there's some people, in the past, there have been people who have taken things like cremation, and they've said, I'm going to be cremated, people who were against the Bible or against God, I'm going to be cremated.
Well,
and
even
have,
Christians, though.
lots of Christians have been cremated, but I mean, not for this reason.
Oh, not for this reason. Okay.
I'm going to be cremated, and I'm going to have my ashes spread all over the world, or into the ocean, whatever, so that on the day of resurrection, if there is a God, he will not be able to put all those pieces back together again, and I won't have to stand and be accountable for anything that I do.
They really think they're going to get
That's what
away
they
with
believe
that,
right? And so the Christian's answer to that is, do you really think God can't take all those pieces and put them back together again? He created the whole world, created the universe, did all those things, right? He couldn't get those pieces back together again?
I think he could pull that off.
Well, right, so Christians don't have much problem with that, right? And that's one reason why Christians have been cremated, and it's not an issue for them. Okay. Plus, we've had many Christian fathers and people who have been cremated at the stake, because of their views and beliefs, and we don't believe they're going to hell as a result of that, right?
And quite honestly, unless the person's recently died, their body has gone back to the dust, and it's just as gone as the cremated body. If if the person died hundreds of years ago, that body's gone. And in fact, some grass grew over there. Right, a cow came and ate the grass. I ate the cow, and now I made up some of that same material. And it's recycled.
Yeah, and here's what we would say: we would say God knows every part of us down to the very molecule, atom, whatever the smallest piece you want to pick. I don't know what the smallest thing is now anymore. What is the smallest thing?
It keeps changing. Yeah,
whatever it is,
quarks.
God knows what it is.
Yeah, okay.
And he can pick every one of those things up and put it right back together again.
Okay,
not a problem. Okay, that's what we would say. But here's what the question would be then. It's one thing to say all my parts are now scattered all over, and he can pick that up. It's a whole other thing to say all of me is here, but one part of me is in somebody else. Now what happens? If he's going to, it's one thing to take inanimate parts, atoms, whatever they are, in the ground or in the ocean, whatever, because I'm dead, and all my parts are there. Or have me be dead, but part of me is still living in someone else. Then if he has to take the part to put us back together again, what happens?
Well, let me see if I can answer that. Let me see if I can. Okay, with the case of the person cremated, and we ask the question, oh, can God not put all the pieces back together? Well, of course he can. Okay, but you don't tempt God. There's a principle where you don't put him to the test, right? And so I believe, I believe it's a good thing for Christians to be buried rather than cremated.
I agree.
As a testimony to the belief in the resurrection, not to help God because it would cause him trouble,
right?
Because it wouldn't cause him trouble,
right?
Right, but as a testimony to the resurrection,
right?
Okay.
Having said that, though,
okay.
Let me just say this, because I know there's people in my church who have been cremated.
Yep.
And part of the reason they've done it is financial, because the finances that it takes to be able to do a burial
That's
as opposed
a different
to
reason.
Is substantial, and financially they didn't have the ability to do that. And so understand that I'm not saying then that it's impossible for that to happen, or that you're going to go to hell, or somebody's going to go to hell as a result of that. But yes, preferable for somebody to be buried body in a casket.
That's right. You're making a distinction between somebody who is cremated for financial purposes, or right, and somebody who's cremated because they're thumbing their nose at God.
Right.
It's like these are between East and West.
I just want to make sure people knew that.
But now, so now you're asking the question. I donated a kidney.
Yes.
I donated a kidney. Okay. Somebody else has got that kidney, and actually that person he passed away. He passed away a year ago. So in the resurrection, this is like this. Jesus. People coming to Jesus and saying, in the resurrection,
right.
In the
Whose wife will she
resurrection,
be?
in the resurrection, whose kidney will it be? And you know what? I haven't got a clue. Am I going to need a kidney? Am I going to urinate? I don't know, right? But there's also the fact is we are recycled, because the people that died before us, as I said, the grass grows, animal comes and eats the grass, I eat the animal. So I've got molecules in me that were in somebody else.
Yep.
That were in somebody else. So when we start the issue of, I don't think we need to answer the question of whose kidney will it be, because whose molecule will it be? I made up of stuff that was made up that somebody else used 200 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's not a problem for God. And so we go back to the issue of, am I helping somebody? I'm not creating a bureaucratic nightmare for God, because now he's got two bodies and it's just like, excuse me, you're supposed to have his kidney. Oy, oy, oy.
Right. But here's what I would say with regard to that.
Okay.
In a perfect world,
yep,
you donate a kidney to somebody.
In a perfect world, I won't be donating a kidney.
You pass away.
Yep.
The other person passes away.
Yep.
Resurrection happens. When that happens, as I was talking about before, your kidney, God would get your kidney back, put it back into you.
Okay.
This guy's kidney that didn't work would go back to him.
Sure.
So now he's got all of his parts
Sounds
back.
good.
You've got all your parts
Yep.
back, right?
Okay.
But what happens when you're still alive, or when you die, this guy's still alive,
Okay.
he still has your kidney in you,
Okay.
and then the resurrection happens, God goes to put your parts back together, but your part is still in him. He's still standing there with your kidney in him. This is the issue now.
So what's happening to him? Because I've been resurrected, but
You're
he's...
the resurrection, because we're assuming this guy isn't a believer.
Okay,
So he's not being resurrected.
Okay. So we're talking about two other people.
We're talking about
okay.
I'm talking about two other.
Okay, we're talking about two other people.
Yeah. So what happens to this person now? When God takes your kidney back to make you whole again, if that is what happens, I'm not saying that is what happens, but if that is what happens, then what happens to the person that has your kidney?
He's told, I'm sorry, but that's a Christian kidney you've got. And he says, my kidney converted.
He's now a Gentile.
That's right. It's now, it's
not
now
a follower anymore.
Yeah. I say, I'm sorry, but your kidney fell away. And then, right. Well, okay. So, what did Jesus say? It's better to cut off your right hand. I mean, this sounds a little bit ridiculous, but he does talk. He talks about mutilation,
yes.
But he's using hyperbole. He's not saying go ahead and do this, but he says it's better to cut off your right hand, rather than so that you don't sin, rather than be thrown into hell with your whole body. So, it's interesting that he has this idea, and he says, enter into life with only one hand. Yeah. Now, my question is, are we really anticipating people going into heaven with in that picture that he's
Yeah.
giving with
Yeah.
only one arm, or do we imagine that that person would be made whole in spite of his arm
Well,
that
I
he
think
cut
we
off?
believe that that's the case, that we will be made whole. But,
Yeah.
but then we go back again to Jesus,
Uh-huh.
who we said were the first one who was resurrected. And when we look at the verses, it says he's the first. Well, he's the model for us. He was the first of many who will be resurrected.
Okay.
We take a look at him. He's still got holes in his hands.
He's still got holes in his
He's still got
hands?
a hole in his side. He tells James, or not James. He tells
Thomas.
Thomas to
Yeah.
stick his hands in his side.
Yeah.
Put his hands through the holes in his hands. So does that mean that we're going to bear all the scars and injuries that we had? If I have my leg amputated, am I going to go into life without my leg? I mean, how does that work?
You're being very difficult now, Ellis. Okay, but those, these are things you have to think about. You know what, Jesus, I think there's a reason why he retained those things, because those scars became those are badges of honor now. But his body was also in such a deteriorated condition that he died on the cross. He was dead, but and then he became alive. So some stuff must have gotten fixed. So I think there's a reason why. The reason why he's got those holes in his hands is because those things which are signs of damage in this life are now medals of honor. Okay, so maybe if I could argue on the behalf of the kidney donors and the organ donors, that missing that organ, because that was part of something that you did that was good, things that we do good, they will shine.
Yep.
And so that will be a badge of honor if you're missing a body part.
Okay. And now understand.
Yep.
I don't necessarily agree or disagree with that.
Okay.
Because of the situation. Because I can't necessarily agree or disagree because of the next question I'm going to ask you. Do you have any Bible verse to back that up? To back up what you just finished saying.
All that stuff that I just said?
I mean, it's a nice story, right? It's a nice way to look at it.
It'd
be great if that's the case, right?
Yeah. You know what? I don't think the Bible deals with it directly, and a lot of it is speculation based on what I believe I understand general principles about what God says He is, who God says He is, and how He wants us to live our lives. You know what? I don't have a Bible verse to back that up because I don't think there's a lot that really deals with it. Why? Because it's not my problem. My problem is to do good, to obey God. That's the end of the matter. Ecclesiastes chapter 12, to obey the commandments and let God figure out how He's going to put us all back together.
Okay. Well, I mean, in saying that, though, I guess, once again, I didn't say I disagree with you.
Yep.
That may very well be the way it is. I don't know. But part of the reason I don't know is because I said there's not many verses we can turn to be able to point that out. But I will say this with regard to this. I don't think, like we're saying that it's the better thing to help them so that they can live. And if we go back to this principle here with regard to, or this question, is physical life always the best option? I think that throughout history, there have been times when physical life wasn't the best option. In fact, we see that early in Christendom when there was Christians who were being persecuted and hunted down and killed, that there was a whole section of Christians who wanted, because they were Christians, when people would come in and go, you know what, we're looking for the Christians because we're going to kill them. There was a whole group of them who would run out and say, look, I'm a Christian, kill me, because they thought that, you know, this is better to die and go be with God than it is to hang around here, and then I can die and for a good cause, and everything will be good. And so the church fathers that were there at the time actually had to make a law saying that unless you run and try to hide from these guys before you're killed, you will not be thought of as a martyr.
They were glorifying martyrdom.
Right. So many of them were saying that you know, it's better to go. And so in that day, if somebody had lost their kidney or something, they would say, you know what, maybe it's better to let them go. That would be good. I mean, different values. We live in a world today where a lot of people think that this is all there is to life.
Yeah.
And so we better hang on to it as tight as we can.
I hear what you're saying.
Right.
I hear what you're saying.
And so I wonder how much of that is permeated us as Christians.
And this is a question that people who are, you know, we talk about quality of life, and Christians are sometimes afraid to talk about quality of life because it's often used to argue for things like abortion and euthanasia. But the fact is, you have to ask the question, in this case, am I actually going to do we always continue to make the person breathe, keep the person alive for as long as possible?
Right.
Are we helping?
Right. Or are we hurting?
Are we helping or are we hurting? Right. And that's a decision that has to be made in each individual case, I think.
Yeah. I think we're going to close with those words.
Sure.
So thank you for joining with us today. If you have any questions for us, we would love to hear from you. Get a hold of me by my email, which is Pastor Wedel, Wedel, at outlook.com. If you have a question that comes on the air, we will be giving you a free gift, compliments of Heartland Baptist Church and CFIS FM. Tune in next week at 8:30, and we will be happy to enjoy another rousing discussion with regard to whatever question might be on our plates on that day. So God bless you, and so long.
Have a
Does
good
good on
week.
you.